She thought no one would dare stop her. Behind sealed doors and forged paperwork, Queen Camilla took what was never hers. Not just jewellery, but memory, legacy. A sapphire tiara worn only by Queen Elizabeth, sealed away in the vaults, never meant to be touched again. Until it was gone. And one royal guard walked into her private estate alone. Knowing if he failed, he wouldn't just lose his post, he'd be erased. But what he found inside wasn't just a tiara, it was a rewritten past, one she planned to wear like it was always hers. So before I show you how a single guard stood face to face with Camilla, exposed everything, and reclaimed the Queen's legacy before it vanished forever, make sure you're subscribed with notifications on, because this time she wasn't just caught, she was shut down. Windsor Castle always settled into a particular kind of stillness after 10 at night. The ceremonial guards rotated out, the brass locks echoed a little longer, and even the air in the staff break room seemed to hum quieter, as though the very stone walls had been trained to hold their breath after dark. Sergeant Theo Grantham preferred it this way. He sat in the corner booth, nursing black coffee that had gone bitter an hour ago, half listening to two junior staffers from logistics chatting near the vending machine. Their voices carried that careless confidence of people who assumed nobody important was listening, until one phrase stopped him cold. Apparently Lady C's getting a custom tiara fitting, done before the Norfolk thing. Theo's mug paused halfway to his lips. He set it down without making a sound, and turned his head just enough to seem casually interested. Sorry, who's getting what fitted? The younger one, an admin clerk with clearance too fresh to know better, chuckled. Camilla. Her people said she wanted the blue one adjusted to sit better. Something about it not matching her, what did they say? Bone structure. His colleague nodded knowingly. Yeah, they were loading stuff into the estate vans this morning. Personal heirlooms, they called it, for some private showcase with ambassadors or whatever. Which tiara? Theo kept his voice level, but his pulse had quickened. A casual shrug. Dunno exactly. Sapphire something, old school piece that belonged to Her Late Majesty. The coffee suddenly tasted like ash. Theo stood slowly, already calculating. Right. Thanks. He was walking toward the door before either could ask why he'd gone so still. His boots echoed through the stone corridor as he made his way to the service lifts, mind racing despite his steady pace. He knew that tiara. Everyone in the guard did, even if they'd never seen it publicly. The sapphire diadem wasn't one of the ceremonial pieces. It had never appeared on state broadcasts or diplomatic portraits. This was Elizabeth's private crown, worn only in her personal chambers, passed down from Queen Mary for moments never meant for cameras. It lived in Vault 3B, one of only 2 storage areas that even the 2021 Modernisation Review hadn't touched. And more importantly, it had been sealed under monarch-level protection since Elizabeth's passing. Camilla had never been granted access to the private vaults. That much was protocol, understood quietly but absolutely throughout the guard. So how could she be having it fitted for anything? The lift doors closed behind him as he pressed the button for the sub-vault floor. If what those clerks had overheard was true, then something sacred had already been compromised. And if he didn't move now, carefully, quietly, it would disappear into some private collection forever, leaving no trace except altered inventory logs and convenient paperwork. No permission, no official channels, no second chances. Just the end of a legacy, worn casually on someone else's head, as though it had always belonged there. Vault 3B wasn't like the others. No digital access panel, no automated lighting, no rotating security detail, only personnel with ceremonial clearance level 7 or above even knew it existed, and fewer still had ever stepped inside. Theo had entered it exactly 3 times during his career, once for orientation with the late Queen herself, once during a winter inspection alongside Lady Whitby, and once more quietly and reverently on the morning after Elizabeth's funeral, when certain items were recatalogued under temporary sovereign suspension. He approached the reinforced door with his clearance pin and the ceremonial skeleton key issued only to senior custodial security. The lock mechanism was older than the Queen's reign, solid brass, built to last centuries. It turned with just enough resistance to feel substantial, important. The door opened without sound. Cool, dry air touched his face as he stepped inside. The vault smelled of old silk, worked leather, and that particular stillness that came from things being exactly where they belonged. Overhead bulbs hummed with just enough flicker to feel trusted rather than modern. He walked directly to display case 5, where the sapphire diadem had rested since 1978. The case itself was different from the public exhibition mounts. Unpolished glass, no motorized lift, just a velvet-lined dome marked by a single brass plaque. Diadem, private custody, not for rotation. But the dome was raised. The case was empty. Only a depression remained in the deep blue silk. Perfectly shaped to the tiara's arch, its absence pressed into the fabric like a shadow that hadn't yet realized the object was gone. Theo leaned closer, his breath fogging the glass slightly. There, barely visible against the dark velvet, was a single strand of silver hair. He didn't touch it. He didn't need to. He recognized the color, and more importantly, he understood what it meant. Someone had been here recently. Someone with no right. The vault register hung on the wall beside the door. Yes, Windsor still kept paper records for the most sensitive items. He flipped past the last signed entry, dated over 2 years ago, in Elizabeth's own hand. Nothing more recent in the physical log. But the digital security panel embedded beside the vault's mechanical wheel told a different story. Access. Time 0313 and date 3 nights ago. Authorization type Deferred Exhibit Preservation Clause. Signed by L. Meredith. Purpose Heritage Documentation Transfer Unscheduled. Theo's jaw clenched. The Deferred Exhibit Clause had been struck from Windsor's protocols in 2019 after Elizabeth herself called it a convenient excuse for robbing memory under the pretense of preservation. She'd been furious about some minor controversy with the Modernization Committee, but her decision had been absolute. Now that dead authorization had somehow been resurrected, used to steal her most personal crown. A memory surfaced unbidden. Elizabeth, during one of her late evening inspections, removing her gloves to personally check the diadem's clasp. "This one's not for the cameras," she'd said, her voice carrying the weight of decades. "It's for remembering. I wear it when I need to feel connected to the women who came before me." Now it was gone. Vanished into some private collection where it would be worn as a trophy rather than honoured as memory. Theo closed the register, sealed the vault behind him, and walked back through the corridor with measured steps. His mind was already working through the implications. If he reported this through official channels now, it would disappear into bureaucratic review. Camilla would claim miscommunication, produce her own paperwork, and the tiara would vanish permanently while committees debated jurisdiction and protocol. He had one choice: catch her with it, in her possession, in a way that couldn't be denied, spun, or buried in royal discretion. And to do that, he'd have to go alone, no backup, no chain of command, just his uniform, his clearance, and the knowledge that if this went wrong, his career wouldn't just end. It would be erased as though he'd never existed. But then, some things mattered more than survival. Theo didn't sleep that night. By dawn, he was reviewing the logistics manifest for Norfolk estate operation, buried on page 3 under the innocuous heading Ceremonial Load-Bearing Rotations. There it was. Special Courier Dispatch. Windsor to Sandringham Annex. Private estate transfer. 2 guards per vehicle. He called in a favour with Corporal Ethan Ward, an old mate from Helmond, now stationed in Royal Transport. No explanations needed, just a quiet name swap in the rotation logs. By noon, Sergeant Theo Grantham was officially assigned as non-dress courier, Vehicle 2 of 4, assisting with private heritage transfer to the Queen Consort's Norfolk estate. No ceremonial uniform, no public-facing badge, just high-clearance cargo handling, the kind of duty that was both essential and invisible. While the convoy prepared to depart, Theo memorized everything he could find: the load manifest, 3 possible access routes to the estate, staff rotation estimates, and, most crucially, blueprints from a 2008 renovation buried in archived MOD contractor files. The plans were outdated, but one detail jumped out: a wing labelled Legacy Hall, climate-controlled expansion private. No public record, no Royal Collection involvement, no rotation logs. He had a strong suspicion about what might be stored there. The 4 vehicles left Windsor under civilian livery, rolling through the countryside like any other government transport operation. Security at the Norfolk estate was managed by private contractors, soft vests, polite efficiency, no probing questions. Each van was cleared by manifest rather than searched. Names checked off lists rather than scrutinized. Theo kept his head down and his hands steady as they passed through the wrought iron gates. Inside, Camilla's estate was beautiful. In that particular way, money always tried to look old. Hedges trimmed to seem wild. Limestone walls brushed with carefully maintained moss. Glass conservatories that mimicked Georgian elegance, but opened with silent hydraulic systems. The convoy was directed to a side building marked Staff Preparation Area. Theo was told to wait there, while cargo was processed and redistributed. The room smelled of leather, conditioning and lavender air freshener, comfortable, expensive, designed to make visitors feel welcome and supervised. But Theo wasn't planning to wait. The moment the last supervisor turned his attention to paperwork, Theo slipped out through a side exit into a corridor marked Maintenance Access Only. His shoes were soft-soled, his body camera deliberately switched off. If this went sideways, there would be no evidence beyond trespassing charges and breach of protocol. His clearance didn't extend to unauthorized movement within this section of the estate. But playing it safe meant the Tiara disappeared forever. He moved through empty hallways like a professional, following the subtle hum of climate control systems. HV, AC equipment for artifact preservation, had a distinctive signature: controlled air pressure, slight acoustic dampening, the whisper of nitrogen-filtered ventilation. He traced it like following breadcrumbs. 2 corridors deeper, he found what he was looking for: a keypad-secured door marked East Display Subchamber. Behind the reinforced glass, LED strip lighting cast everything in museum-quality illumination. And there, mounted on the wall beside the entrance, was a brass plaque that made his chest tighten. Private Legacy Hall, curated under direct sovereign dispensation. No such dispensation existed. Theo knew that with absolute certainty, which meant only one thing: he'd found Camilla's secret gallery. The place where stolen history was being rewritten as personal collection. And if she discovered him here before he could document what was inside, she could destroy him before he ever spoke a word of truth. The door's security system accepted his clearance without protest. Apparently his escort credentials extended further than expected. As Theo stepped inside, the first thing that struck him wasn't what he saw, but what he felt. The temperature was controlled to museum precision. The air carried that sterile, conditioned quality of professional conservation. This wasn't storage, it was curation. A private exhibition space built in absolute secrecy, hidden behind legitimate renovations and false documentation. Display cases stretched the length of the room, each bathed in perfectly calibrated lighting. Not the standard archival mounts used by the Royal Collection, but the kind of presentation-grade installations found in exclusive private galleries. These weren't meant for preservation. They were meant for showing off. Theo moved slowly past the first case, then stopped. Inside were Queen Elizabeth's ceremonial gloves, the ones embroidered with the South African Tour crest from 1954. But the identification placard read, "Personal Effects, Queen Camilla, Early Reign Traditions." His stomach dropped. He continued to the next case, Elizabeth's white gold state watch, worn during Parliament openings for over 2 decades. The placard, "Private Timepiece, Queen Consort Collection." Every item in the room had belonged to Elizabeth. Every label had been changed. Every photograph had been digitally altered, Elizabeth's hands cropped out of portraits, her silhouette obscured, lighting adjusted to suggest a different wearer. Careful forgeries designed to rewrite history one artifact at a time. At the far end of the gallery, beneath a crystal chandelier and raised on its own pedestal, stood the centerpiece. Theo approached it with dread and fury warring in his chest. The sapphire diadem sat on black velvet, like a crown of conquest rather than mourning. Its delicate platinum frame still caught light beautifully, the sapphires gleaming like captured starlight. But its identity had been completely rewritten. The placard read, Royal Sapphire Diadem, worn privately by Her Majesty Queen Camilla during early reign transition ceremonies. Theo felt the air leave his lungs. This wasn't just theft, it was erasure, the systematic elimination of Elizabeth's legacy, one stolen memory at a time. He pulled out his personal phone, not the department-issued device that could be tracked and confiscated, but his own. Silent, discreet, essential. He photographed everything, the case from multiple angles, the fraudulent placard, the lighting setup, serial numbers, wide shots and close details, evidence that would stand up in any proceeding, should it come to that. Next to the tiara was a framed photograph. Camilla, wearing what appeared to be the same piece, except the image was wrong. The clasp didn't match, the shadows were too soft, her neckline had been digitally adjusted. Theo knew the real photograph. He'd been present when it was taken. Elizabeth at a private Commonwealth veterans reception. The tiara catching afternoon light through stained glass windows. It wasn't Camilla in that manipulated image. It was Elizabeth, systematically edited out of her own history. His voice broke the gallery's silence, barely more than a whisper. You don't get to rewrite her. Not while he still drew breath. Not while he still wore the uniform. He slipped the phone back into his pocket and turned toward the exit, already planning his next move. But a voice stopped him before he reached the door. Cold, amused, unmistakably familiar. So the help wanders. Theo turned slowly to find Camilla standing in the archway, flanked by two aides, who promptly disappeared at a subtle gesture from her gloved hand. She approached with unhurried confidence, the bearing of someone accustomed to having her word be absolute law. She didn't shout or panic. Instead, she smiled with the kind of warmth that never reached her eyes. You know, she said, letting her gaze drift toward the stolen tiara, that piece never suited her properly. Always looked too elaborate for such a simple woman. Theo remained silent, spine straight, hands motionless. Camilla began a slow circuit of the room, examining her displays with theatrical nostalgia. She wore these things like they were sacred relics, like they meant something beyond their monetary value. But she never understood how power actually works. You don't preserve it in vaults. You wear it. You claim it. She moved closer, her voice dropping to something conspiratorial. I wear them better. Theo didn't blink. Her eyes glinted with something predatory. No salute, Sergeant. No apology for trespassing? Or do the serving classes only grovel when explicitly commanded? Still silence. Just steady, unwavering eye contact. Camilla tilted her head with mock concern. You're one of those, aren't you? The nostalgic loyalists. The keepers of dead queens and forgotten protocols. She stepped past him to rest her gloved fingers on the tiara's display case. Here's what your sort never grasped. She's gone. Buried, mourned, over. And I'm still here, still breathing, still wearing the crown. Theo's jaw tightened fractionally, but his voice remained level. You had no right to take it. Camilla smiled like a teacher correcting a particularly slow child. Take it? Darling, I inherited it, along with the estate, the staff, and the endless burden of managing this family's legacy. She left behind rooms full of symbols, trinkets gathering dust, while the monarchy struggled to remain relevant. I'm simply giving them new purpose. She moved between him and the exit, her presence suddenly more threatening. But here's your problem. You don't belong here. No authorization, no invitation, no legitimate reason to be wandering through private archive. She raised her phone, casually aiming its camera toward him. Would you like to explain this moment to the press? A grief-stricken nation, watching one of their beloved guards, caught trespassing in a royal residence. I wonder how they'd interpret such suspicious behavior. Her thumb hovered over the record button. Should I caption it, "Modern soldier harasses grieving widow"? Theo's heart hammered against his ribs, but his hands never moved. He recognized this for what it was, bait. She wanted him to snap, run, lash out, anything she could twist into a scandal that would bury the truth along with his credibility. But he'd held position under mortar fire in Helmand, maintained silence while insurgents passed within meters of his checkpoint. This was just another test of will. He met her stare without flinching. You don't deserve what you took. Camilla's smile flickered, showing teeth. Careful, Sergeant. Loyalty like yours has a way of getting people permanently reassigned. She stepped back, phone still raised, lips parting, to deliver what was clearly meant to be a final, crushing blow. And that's when the voice cut through the room like a blade through silk. Lower that device. Immediately. Camilla froze mid-gesture, her phone slowly descending as she processed what she'd heard. She turned toward the sound, and for the first time since Theo had entered the gallery, uncertainty flickered across her features. Prince William stood in the archway. No security detail, no ceremonial uniform, no photographers or documentation team, just two Privy Council officers in dark suits, one carrying a sealed folder. William wore a charcoal overcoat and the expression of someone who'd already decided how this would end. His gaze never left Camilla's face. You've been systematically relabeling Crown artifacts as personal acquisitions, rewriting provenance documentation, creating fraudulent exhibition materials. We have comprehensive evidence of classification theft. Camilla's composure cracked, replaced by barely controlled outrage. How dare you speak to me that way in my own home? William stepped forward with the measured calm of absolute authority. This estate was transferred under conditional royal patent. This room was never authorized for private exhibition. These artifacts were removed from Crown custody without proper documentation. He gestured toward the displays with controlled disgust. This entire operation exists in violation of sovereign heritage protection. Camilla moved toward him, fury breaking through her carefully maintained facade. You think this theatrical entrance makes you king already? No, William replied quietly, but it reminds everyone who we're actually meant to serve. She stepped closer, her voice rising to something dangerous. You loved her too much. That's always been your weakness. That woman controlled this family from beyond the grave, and you're too sentimental to see it. The gallery fell silent except for the hum of climate control systems. Even the Privy Council officers seemed to hold their breath. William's response came without heat, but with the finality of a closing door. She protected it. All of it. The tradition, the memory, the institution itself. He turned slightly toward Theo. Sergeant Grantham. Theo straightened to full attention. Sir? Have you located the missing artifact? Yes, sir. Verified and documented. Retrieve it. Catalogue it properly. Touch nothing else. Theo nodded sharply and moved toward the display case. Camilla's voice cracked like a whip. You cannot do this. You have no legal authority for this raid. William looked at her for a long, devastating moment. You're not above the oath you swore. The words hung in the air like a verdict. No anger, no theatrics, just unshakable conclusion. You never were. Camilla's hands trembled at her sides, her mouth opening as if to deliver one final assault, but no words came. Whatever power she'd held in this room had evaporated, leaving only the echo of what she'd tried to steal. William addressed the Privy Council officer beside him. Execute the recovery authorization. This collection is now classified under emergency heritage protection. He didn't look back as he walked toward the exit, but he left one final instruction for Theo. Handle it properly, Sergeant. Some things can't be replaced once they're gone. Then he was gone, his footsteps silent but decisive on the polished floor. The spell that had held the room in artificial grandeur finally broke. Theo approached the tiara's case with steady hands. Camilla stepped aside, but not before delivering her parting shot. "You may recover the stones, Sergeant, but you'll never understand their real value." He didn't respond. He was already reaching for the case lock, focused on the only thing that mattered now, bringing Elizabeth's memory home. Theo's gloved fingers found the recovery key in his jacket pocket. The case lock disengaged with a soft metallic whisper. No alarms, no resistance. The tiara rested beneath its glass dome, like a captive thing waiting for rescue. He paused for just a moment, remembering. Then he lifted the dome carefully. The conditioned air stirred, cooler and lighter somehow, as if the gallery itself was exhaling after holding its breath too long. The sapphire diadem was exactly as he remembered from vault inspections, delicate, luminous, carrying the weight of decades in its platinum curves. But it felt different now. Not heavier, exactly. More significant, like holding a piece of living memory that had nearly been lost forever. He cupped it with the same care he'd used the morning after Elizabeth's funeral, when protocol demanded it be moved to ceremonial storage. But this moment carried different stakes. Then, he'd been preserving legacy. Now, he was rescuing it. Camilla watched in silence as he placed the tiara into the velvet-lined recovery case. Her expression had hardened into something crystalline and bitter, pride hemorrhaging in real time, authority dissolving like sugar in rain. She didn't speak until he'd secured the latches and signed the inner identification tag. Then her voice emerged like smoke from a dying fire. "You think taking it back makes you righteous?" Theo met her gaze directly. "No, just necessary." From the archway, one of the Privy Council officers approached with a sealed document folder. William returned to oversee the transfer, scanning the warrant's contents as he walked. "Under Article 9 of the Crown Legacy Protocols," he read aloud, "all private holdings derived from unauthorized sovereign property transfers are subject to immediate seizure. Complete inventory of remaining displays will commence within 48 hours. You'll receive formal documentation. Comply quietly." Camilla's laugh was sharp and hollow. "You're enjoying this. The power, the vindication." William didn't blink. "I'm restoring what was stolen." Her hands clenched at her sides. "You think some jeweled trinket makes her immortal?" William was already turning to leave. She didn't need to be immortal. Then he paused, looking back just long enough to deliver his final words. She just needed to be remembered correctly. No ceremony followed his exit, no formal declarations or official pronouncements. Just quiet, absolute conclusion. Theo found himself alone with Camilla in the suddenly diminished gallery. She stood among her remaining displays, but they looked different now, exposed, like stage props after the curtain had fallen and the audience had gone home. He tucked the recovery case securely under his arm and paused at the threshold. When he spoke, his voice carried no triumph, no satisfaction, just the weight of a simple truth. She never needed to steal anything to be remembered. That's the difference. Then he walked out through the corridors that had seemed so intimidating an hour before, past staff members who now avoided eye contact, into the Norfolk evening where an unmarked vehicle waited with its engine running and door open. He climbed in, placed the case on the seat beside him, and felt the door close with a soft, final sound. The tiara was going home. No headlines would mark its return, but that had never been the point. Some victories were measured in silence. The gates of Windsor opened just as dawn touched the eastern horizon with pale gold light. Theo rode in the back of the unmarked vehicle, watching familiar towers and walls emerge from the morning mist. No fanfare waited in the courtyard. No ceremony marked their return. Just the quiet satisfaction of legacy returning to where it belonged. He carried the recovery case himself, refusing assistance from the duty guards who understood without being told that this moment belonged to him alone. The long corridor leading to the archival vaults had never felt more sacred, each footstep echoing with purpose, with completion. Vault 3B waited exactly as he'd left it, patient and unchanged. He keyed in his credentials, turned the brass wheel with its familiar resistance, and stepped into the cool, still air that smelled of preservation and permanence. Display case 5 still bore the depression in its silk cushion, the exact shape of absence, where the tiara should have rested. It looked like a wound in fabric, a scar left by theft. Theo opened the recovery case with the careful reverence of a surgeon handling a beating heart. He lifted the sapphire diadem and held it briefly, remembering Elizabeth's voice during their last formal inspection together. "Not everything precious needs to be seen to be valued, Sergeant. Some things just need to be kept safe." At the time, he'd thought it was casual conversation. Now, with uncertain consequences waiting and his future hanging on a thread of royal discretion, he understood what she'd really meant. He placed the tiara back onto its silk cushion. It settled into place as if it had never left, the platinum and sapphires catching the vault's dim lighting and scattering fragments of blue fire across the chamber walls. As he closed and locked the case, the automatic lighting dimmed on its evening cycle. But just before the room fell into protective darkness, a shaft of golden morning light broke through the high, stained glass window, touching the tiara one last time. It shimmered like something alive, unburdened, home. Theo stood at attention, not for inspection or protocol, but for her, for the memory of a queen who had trusted him to guard what couldn't protect itself. On the vault's ancient wooden table, someone had left a folded slip of paper. No royal seal, no official letterhead. Just a single line in neat, familiar handwriting. "Returned safely. No damage. Identity confirmed. W." He placed it carefully in the vault ledger, next to Elizabeth's original catalogue entry from decades before. Then he sealed the chamber, turned the brass wheel, and stepped back into the corridor. Behind that reinforced door, history had been restored without press releases or public acknowledgement. No headlines would celebrate this quiet victory, but then the most important battles were often fought in shadows. 2 days later, the envelope arrived with his morning rotation assignment. Hand-delivered, no courier markings, cream-coloured paper with a single gold-embossed initial, W. Theo waited until the guard room emptied before opening it. Inside was a brief note in the same precise script he'd seen on the vault acknowledgement. "Stand down from transport duty. Reassigned. Windsor Legacy Watch. Permanent posting. Thank you for keeping what matters where it belongs." No signature was necessary. The meaning was clear enough. Theo folded the note once and placed it in his desk drawer beside his Afghanistan service medal. The drawer closed without sound, but something had shifted in the air around him. Nothing changed publicly or institutionally. But when he walked through Windsor's inner corridors, younger guards stepped aside with something approaching reverence. When he took his post near the east vaults, their salutes seemed sharper, more purposeful. No one spoke about what had happened. No one needed to. But one afternoon, as he passed the main watch station, a probationary guardsman whispered just loud enough to be heard, "You didn't just serve the Queen, you honoured her." Theo didn't respond, didn't smile, didn't acknowledge the comment at all. He simply adjusted his gloves, stepped into position beside the vault entrance, and resumed his watch. No medals, no recognition, no glory, just duty fulfilled and memory preserved. And for the first time in months, he felt like he was truly protecting something worth his life. Should a royal guard risk everything, career, reputation, future, to recover something most people would never know was missing? Was Prince William right to confront Camilla directly, knowing it could fracture the royal family publicly? And do you believe royal artefacts should ever leave Crown custody, even for private royal use? Drop your thoughts below. We read every comment. If you believe some legacies are too sacred to steal, hit that like button, subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss these stories that bring truth to light, no matter how deep some people try to bury it. Share this with someone who remembers when duty meant something more than following orders. There's another confrontation queued up on your screen. Click it now, and I'll see you tomorrow with another story that proves honour still exists in the most unexpected places. Thanks for watching.